So Triptease is a startup in the hotel space. We're hiring, just like everyone else. So yeah, http4js is something I wrote. This is a decent view, actually. So something I wrote over the last 6 months or so in my spare time. And the way it actually started was, so it's a port of http4k, which is a HTTP framework for Kotlin. And I was working with one of the creators, and I literally copied and pasted some of the core files and made it work in TypeScript, and that's how I started. So yeah, http4k is written by Dave Denton and Ivan Sanchez, and the kind of loosely the concept is called server as a function. And early ideas for that came from Dan Bodot's Utterly Idle, so I just wanted to give a couple of shout outs that anything that's good here I probably stole from them. Cool, so what is the approach? I'm not going to do that whole thing, by the way. This is my only slide, and then I'll do some live coding, which will probably not work. So what's different about http4js? So immutability, that's the third point. You can reason about the order of things in http4js, unlike this slide. So yeah, the request and response objects are immutable, so you can't just go chucking like database connections on your request. It actually conforms to an interface. The kind of philosophy is anti-framework, so I don't want to solve every problem you're going to have. It's meant to be more like lightweight, and you build the solutions yourself. I wrote it using kind of TDD, sort of. There's like 100 tests that run in 3 seconds, so it's quite a nice like place to live. And like I'd love you to, tell me. I'm new to TypeScript, so I'm sure there's lots of problems, and I'd love you to contribute. So yeah, like I say, bugs will exist because it is fairly new, but on the other hand, it's kind of nearly finished because I don't think it should do much more. So yeah, what are the coolest things that I'm going to show you through live coding? So in-memory testing, this is our ability to test our routing without actually having to make an HTTP request, like over the wire. Or having to mock everything out in order to pass in like an object to a route. It's very quick to get up and running, but I guess so are the other Node HTTP frameworks, which is funny because we were chatting before and Stephen said it's quite a mature ecosystem now, like no one would ever write a new HTTP framework. And I was like, do you know what my talk's about?
Sorry.
That's all right. That's okay. I'm sure it's useless. And then it's got a simple HTTP client that comes with it. So like you don't have to learn another library, and you don't have to, therefore, jimmy around. I'll explain later. Zero dependencies is quite nice, so it doesn't pull in like half of the planet. Yeah, it's written in TypeScript, so if you're doing TypeScript, it's good for you because it's TypeScript first. And yeah, I'll just get to it basically. So I was going to like initiate an npm, like a project and stuff, but then I thought the internet and stuff. So here is an empty project. There's nothing in it except I've done npm install, and we've got TypeScript. TS Node runs TypeScript natively, so you don't need to compile to JavaScript. http4js, and we're going to write a couple of tests, so there's just Mocha and Chai. These are, if you've never seen this before, the @types is like a repo full of type definitions for JavaScript libraries, so you can use it in TypeScript. Just like a quick show of hands, like people who use TypeScript. So like, yeah, like 20, 30% maybe. Okay, so hopefully it won't look too strange. Cool. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how quick it is to get up and running with it. So it's like fairly easy to get started. Fingers crossed. Okay, so what we're going to say is we want to like serve a GET request to /, and you can see that WebStorm is helping me out. It's like, oh, you want to import something. So get, and what we need to give it is a function from a request to a promise of response. So if by giving this async decorator, it's going to make this into whatever I type here will be a promise of that. And we say a response of like 200 and then a string. So like hello world. And it's helping me out here again. And this is a root. So we're saying get to slash, give a response, 200 hello world. Now in order to start it up as a server, all I have to type is, I say as server. As server has like a default value of like a native Node HTTP server. So it's like minimal wrapping around Node itself. And then you say start. Cool. So this is the bit where it breaks. And not yarn, npm start. So this runs tsnode index.ts. So we're running that file using tsnode. And if we go to localhost 3000, so hello world, yay. So by default, it runs on port 3000. So that's how quick it is to get up and running. I'll just briefly explain this again. So a get to slash, we need a function from a request to response. Request actually comes in here. I've just not explicitly stated it. So we have a request here, and then we return a response. Cool. So that's how to get up and running. I'm just going to delete that because we're not going to test that code, just to make it clear. OK, so here's a test, and I've done some very basic structure so you don't watch me boringly import stuff. So we've got some JSON talks. I thought we'll write a talks app that lists some talks that are on today. Maybe just one talk that's on now. So it's not that useful. But yeah, so describe talks. It lists some talks. So I want to write a test here. And this is, so what I'm going to show you here is how you can do in-memory testing. So this is one of my 3 cool things about it, I think, is that I'm going to test a route now. So I'm going to say that, let's say I have some routing. I have this method on routing called serve, which allows me to serve a request using http4js, but not over the wire. So this doesn't actually go over the wire. It passes it to our routing object. So we're going to serve a request of a get request to say slash. So okay, it's whining about me, doesn't know what routing is. I would usually extract a variable, but it's not very helpful. So let's just write it. Our routing, which we saw earlier, I'm going to say get to slash talks gives us a response of 200, and then at the moment the response bodies are just strings. So we're going to say json.stringify talks. Oops. Sorry. Okay, import some stuff. Import some stuff. So kind of the nice thing in TypeScript there, you see, oops, is, does that all fit? Yeah, it all fits. Cool. So this is now compiling, and this is going to be our response. So if we await this, we then expect that our response body to equal json.stringify there's some problems with brackets. Response body to equal JSON. No, it's just not helping me. Oh, there's a problem up here. Right. Let's try to exported the wrong thing. Right. So there is no interrupting the speaker unless you definitely know what's wrong. Talks. Cool. So here's our test. We're saying, let's serve this request with our routing, and let's see that the response is what we expect. And this should fail because, can everyone see that all right, sort of? Yeah. Cool. We expected some JSON back, and we got get to slash did not match roots. So it's like our default, when nothing matches, it gives you this. And that's because our request is just a slash. So if we make that slash talks, we should now have a green test. Cool. So like, we've actually kind of tested our routing and that it works. It does what we expect. We have not made an HTTP request here. We've just passed a request object to our routing, which knows how to like route it. And yeah, I guess it's quite simple, right? There's not loads of dependencies and stuff, but the same principle applies. I guess we can talk about that after. So the next thing I want to show you is that is like the simple HTTP client. So when I said you don't have to learn another API, is let's imagine now that we're actually going to fetch our talks from another service, like a talks service. So we don't have them. We have to fetch the talks from somewhere. So we want to write another test. And it's basically going to be the same test. So in order to serve, so we're imagining we're going to make an HTTP request to another service that gives us some talks. So we want to make a request to HTTP on some other port, 3001/talks. This will be a GET request. In order to actually make this request go over the wire, all I'm going to say is, wait, I have to pass it to HTTP client. Oh, didn't figure that out. And then we're going to expect the same thing again. So body string to, oh god. Body string to equal JSON.stringify talks. Okay, cool. So what I've done is I'm basically making the same request, and all I do is pass it to HTTP client. So it's just a function that takes a request. It's the same, it's talking the same language. It takes a request object, and this is probably the dumbest class actually in the whole project. It's like 30 lines that just passes it to Node that knows what to do. It's like, but you're talking the same thing. You're just saying, here's a request, pass it to an HTTP client, and actually make the request over HTTP. So it's pretty cool. That's what was our failure. It said, okay, doesn't compile. Yeah. Right, the reason that passes is because I think it is running already, 3001. Let's change that. I know why, it's not actually running this test. Okay, connection refused. Like that doesn't exist. Right, so just to save, like, what you might want to do, I don't know if some people generally do this, but you'd like have a fake implementation of that service so that you could quickly unit test against it. So we might have const like fake talks service that we're talking to, and that could be a get to /talks. You know, it serves, okay, this is getting boring now. A res of but this needs to start. Oh no, how do we start a server? So, like I said before, this is like the default parameter is unative server on 3000 that you can pass in parameter. Actually, I've already done implementations for Express and Koa backends. So if you wanted to have Express server running behind the scenes, you could actually make a new Express server and run it on a port, and then like there'd be two steps. Like all the requests would go through that, and then it would come to me, or come to http4js rather. Okay, so that's just so that you can like use your favorite middleware, or if you want to migrate an application from one to the other, you might want to be in some kind of middle state between the two. So actually, what's good practice is before and after to start and stop our server. So we're going to say fake talk service dot start, and after dot stop. And now if you run it, it goes green. Yay. Cool. So it's thanks. It's me just trying to drum it up. I don't know. Is that cool? I think it's quite cool. It's quite easy. There's not much to do. There's not much boilerplate there. It's like 2-3 lines of code to start, stop servers. And yeah, and the fact that it's like the same interface here to actually go over the why, you don't have to do much more. So those are the main things. It's kind of everything I wanted to show you, except there's something missing, which is like middleware. So how do you do middleware in http4js? I thought it might be cool to just have a quick look at that. So what we might do is have, like, we want to have a custom 404 page. That's quite a common sort of use case. So what we're going to do is very similar. So I'm just going to copy and paste. This is another in-memory test. So we're going to do a get to an unknown root. And we expect it to equal our custom 404 page. Cool. So this test should fail. Oh, I'm just pressing the wrong shortcuts. OK, so we're seeing our actual. Can we see that? This is our default, and we kind of want to say custom 404 page. Like, we want to serve our cool, like, you didn't find our server thing. So how do we do that? So we're talking to routing. At the moment, it's just this one route. We want to add so it's called filters. A filter is like the old school, maybe like Java-y name for middleware. And this is how it works. So you have a handler. So I haven't talked much about the immutability. Like, the immutability is that this function has to be from request to response. You can't not return a response. You can't pass the response object around to other things and, like, therefore rely on other parts of your code to have seen it in a certain order. You have to return a response here. You can't return foo string. And it's the same, like, it becomes very clear when we write a middleware filter now. So so middleware, like, if you're writing, what you do is you're writing a handler from request to response, but it needs to be aware of the previous handler, and it will become clear. This is exactly how you write middleware already. So we're going to return a function, async, from a request. Yes, import that. And now we need to return a response, so request to response. Right, and what we want to do is we want to say that the response equals, we need to await it. So we pass the request to the next handler that might want to do something with it. It passes it down the chain. Then at this point we can say, if the response status is a 404, so we can hook into it on the way down by doing things with the request. If we wanted to, we could say, like, request with a header. Let's add a header. So you can do things on the way down to the request, and then at this point, once you pass it to the next handler, you're messing around with the response on the way out. So we're saying, if the response happened to be a 404, actually return a res of 404 custom 404 page. Else, like, if it's not a 404, let's not mess around with it. Let's return it. Okay, so a filter knows about the previous handler. We then have to write another handler, which is a function from request to response. We look at the response, so we pass the request into the next handler. When it comes back out, we say, if it was a 404, like, let's return our custom 404 page. And if we rerun that test, it passes. Yay. Cool. And it comes with some built-in ones. So like there are some already like useful generic filters that you might want to use and stuff. So yeah, that's basically it. If you want to check out more, the docs are like fairly okay. They're here on the GitHub. You can link through, and hopefully after about 20 minutes, like more stuff. It's not too long. It's not too short. Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom.